Welcome. Thank you for coming tonight. My name is Chris Lynch, and I call this meeting to order. So I'm calling this meeting to order because this is actually a meeting of the school board. You'll notice there's a quorum of the school board here tonight. So this meeting is subject to open meeting laws. So it's been posted. The agenda's been posted. So the only agenda item tonight is bell schedule. So that's the only thing we can talk. Now, there's lots of things that intersect the bell schedule. We can talk all those. But that is the only item on the agenda tonight. We'll tape the meeting. There'll be minutes, all that good stuff. So just let you know that. Tonight, I think we have 6 of us here.
Lori
Rowland, Natasha. Oh, no, we have all 7. Tom got here. Tom Yates, Chris Liebig, Phil Hemingway, Ryan Kirschling. So all 7 here. So that's outstanding. We're going to go through a little bit of a PowerPoint process here and just talk about where we're at in the process, and then Lori's going to take you through kind of some of the details. If you want to go to the next one, Kim, it's got the agenda. Introductions, which we just did, review the process, small group activities, so that's why you're in tables, if you're wondering why we're doing the table thing. We found it's very useful to have conversations between small groups and talk about potential solutions and what you want us to take back to the board table. And then at the end, we're going to report out. So when you do your small group activity, we'll ask you to report out. We'll hear from all the tables. And then at the end, we'll do an exercise. We found this to be very helpful. What are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things you want us to take back to the board table? So we're going to talk this on Tuesday. And what's the summary that we're going to take back and share at the board table so the rest of the public can know what the messages were tonight. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it off to Lori, right?
Okay. Okay, so just started with some background. So the bell schedule, just to be clear, is the start and the end time for the day. It's not the length of the day. We're not here to talk tonight about the length of the day, which... Talk a little louder. Oh, sure. I'll try. So if you can't hear me, please do tell me. So we're here to talk about the start and end time of the school day, not the length of the school day. That was changed last year, as many of you may recall, and that's set already for next year. So that might be something that could be looked at in the future, but for next year, at this point, you know, we're staying with what we've got, and so just to be clear about that. We're talking about the bell schedule tonight because last year a decision was made fairly quickly and there was not time for community input at that time. So there was a recommendation actually made by Director Lynch that a task force be put together to examine bell schedule further. And so we did that this fall, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a moment. But some of the other reasons that we're talking about bell schedule are, one big reason is that there's some busing problems that have come up this year that are causing delays at the elementary schools of up to 25 minutes after school. There's kids waiting for buses, and the teachers and the principals and the parents have given us resounding feedback that that is not acceptable. So we've been asked to address that. That's one of the reasons we're talking. And another reason is because we've heard from our teachers that our elementary students are fatigued at the end of the day, particularly after about 2:30 or so. So that's a concern with the day now going to 3:45. And then another reason is because of a recommendation by the American Academy of Pediatrics that suggests or that recommends that secondary students not start school until 8:30 or later. So those are some of the things that led to us organizing a task force and then now having listening posts on this topic. So the overarching goal of this discussion is to find a bell schedule that is best for our students academically. There's many things that we could choose as the priority as we're choosing our bell schedule, but we want to focus on academics, and that links directly back to our strategic plan as a board. So if it changes, it would change in August 2016, so next school year. And we are hoping to make a decision about this in February. We have a board meeting on Tuesday where we'll be talking about it, perhaps making a decision then. So our task force met several times. We had 3 meetings, And I know this is really impossible to read, but this is on board docs online if you'd like to read all the names of the people. But I'll just tell you some of the categories. We had physicians, we had students, parents, teachers, student family advocates, before and after school representatives, administrators, persons representing athletics, persons representing non-athletic extracurriculars, and we had people from our unions that represent the staff in the district. As I mentioned, the length of the day is set. The elementary day is 7 hours. The secondary day is 7 hours and 10 minutes. And I also want to point out that the majority of our busing costs are paid for out of the general fund, which is the same fund that pays for our teachers and our curriculum and a lot of our programming. So that's why we consider money when we make these decisions about busing in particular, because also our funding situation right now is not great. So something to be aware of is that if secondary starts before elementary, like we have it currently, there has to be a longer gap between the days because the secondary day ends 10 minutes, it's 10 minutes longer. So if you understand what I'm saying, at the end of the day, that takes 10 minutes away from that gap that there is in the beginning of the day. So you have to have a longer gap in the beginning of the day to end up with the same gap in the afternoon. So just to be clear that makes sense to you. So as I mentioned, pediatrics, American Academy of Pediatrics says it's ideal for secondary students to start later. There really isn't a lot of research, honestly, about elementary students and student achievement and school start time. Anecdotally, I think that most of us would agree that elementary students probably are more likely to wake up earlier than secondary students and be alert and ready to go earlier in the day. That's not true for everyone, but across, if you do a wide selection of people and ask them, I think a lot of people would say their elementary students tend to wake up earlier than their secondary students. But I know that's definitely the case at my house.
Isn't the reality, the reason why there's no research on this, and nobody's done it, because of fear of kids in the dark who are elementary age getting hit by
I have
cars
no
and
idea
trucks?
why there hasn't been research done on that.
There is one that came out in June 2014.
Yeah, one. But
Well, I think
I
maybe
worked in
more
3
than
districts that looked at
one.
this, and they didn't do it for safety reasons for fear of students walking in the dark in the wintertime because they thought that the traffic concerns were a bigger issue.
Okay,
So-
and we'll talk about that. But I'm just referring to scientific journals and scientific studies that have been done. There's not a lot about elementary. So when we started with our task force, the first task we had was to define kind of like our ideal. If we had no constraints in the world, what would we want? And the group converged upon an 8 o'clock start time for elementary and a 3:30 end time for secondary. Now the problem with that is that only allows a 20-minute gap at the end of the day. That is not enough. Go ahead and go on. So you'll see in this slide the prices, or the relative cost differences that we experience when we change the length of the gap between. So I'm going to try and stay out of your way here, but so this cost is moving, just so you know. Busing is always changing. So this is an estimate of what our costs are today, but you should think of these things in terms of relative differences, not in terms of actual cost differences, because it will change according to many things: discretionary busing, new busing routes, more students. There's many things that could cause it to change. So a couple things I want to highlight. This number, which is current, and actually that's only part of the busing costs. The actual busing budget right now is $4.3 million. But these are what Durham, the bus company, calls the direct costs. And that cost actually has built into it our busing problem. To fix our busing problem that we have now with our delays after school would cost $400,000. So if we stayed with the exact same schedule we had today and fixed that problem, it would cost us $400,000. So you can kind of think of that when you think of that number. Couple things other that I want to mention. 50/40 just to explain that, 50 is a 50-minute gap between elementary and high school. 40 is a 40-minute gap between elementary and junior high. That was an option that the task force asked us to have priced out. And it wasn't one that was actually favored by the task force because they felt like you still needed a 50-minute gap. They were hoping that gap would be less for secondary, but when they looked at the bus routes, it really couldn't be any less than 50. And the reason for that, honestly, is because the secondary routes are really long. They have to go much further out than the elementary routes. And they just need a 50-minute gap, and that will be the case even after Liberty opens. And also they felt like the price difference was not, a tremendous savings that would justify that would make sense. However, if you guys like that option, we want to hear that. So I think I covered all those. You can go on. So if you just kind of look at the middle ground here with what I said before about end time for secondary being 3:30 and start time for elementary being 8, cut it in half, you come to this. Coincidentally, that is exactly what our task force came up with. They suggested either a 7:45 or a 7:50 start time. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. These were the recommendations. They recommended that elementary start first and secondary start second. And like I just said, 7:45 or 7:50. And the first preference was a 50-minute start gap, even though there was some savings with the 55-minute gap. There's some, actually, if you don't mind going back. Sure. Back one more. Yeah, there's actually a minus sign here. It's hard to see. But if you go to a 55-minute gap, there's a savings. But the task force felt like adding on 5 more minutes just was, if we could avoid it, it'd be better. And this is closer to cost neutral. Now, again, I want to show you why there's differences in the cost. When we have more tiers, what tiers are is when a bus goes out, picks up like some high school students, drops them off at high school, then goes out and picks up some elementary students, drops them off at elementary school. That's one cost. It's not incrementally more because they did 2 routes. It's the same price. Now, if we have those buses going at the same time, then it's double because it's 2 buses then instead of 1. I don't know why, but that's just how it's priced. Now, granted, fuel and wear and tear and all that would be more with the longer routes, but just to give you a feel for why these price differences are so big, it's because when you go to a 30-minute gap, there's only 2 routes that can be tiered, and that therefore it costs us almost $500,000, over $500,000 more. So anyway, okay, we'll go on. Okay, so this is where I'm going to let Chris take over. He kind of told you a little bit about your assignment.
Quick question
Yeah.
before we go.
Uh-huh.
So I know you mentioned that the AAP recommended the secondary start time to be 8:30.
Mhm.
What were the AAP recommendations for elementary?
They didn't make one.
Didn't make one.
Yeah, there really is not a lot of scientific research for elementary students. I looked very hard and I couldn't find any. And I had teachers also help me look and they couldn't find anything either. I think I found one article. It's actually in our reading list on board docs. If you put Bell Schedule in on board docs, you can find our reading list. There is one article about elementary students, but that's really it. There's not a lot of research that's been done.
Did that article say anything?
I think, I'm trying to remember. I think it said that middle income students really don't benefit from was it earlier or later start time? I'm sorry. I can't remember. I just remember it was a small study. It was done in Kentucky, I think. And it was a very small study, and so I didn't feel like it was comparable to all the research that's been done for secondary students. So.
Laura, can I just jump in a little bit before we turn it over to the groups? Just say a couple more things. One of the things I think we should say at the beginning is that we should just acknowledge all the options are lousy. I mean, that's what I came away from the task force with. Our current option, we could stay with the current option if you want, but it's really lousy because like Lori explained, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of elementary schoolers are being sort of waiting around, needing supervision for up to, 25 minutes or more after school, after a very long day at school, late in the afternoon, and then they're getting home early. And remember that you can put an elementary schooler on a bus only up to an hour. But so the one that's driving farthest is going an hour. So if they're leaving school at 4:10 or 4:15 in the afternoon, they're getting home at 5:15. And in the winter, that's dark. So you got this darkness problem kind of pushing you on both ends. One of the, again, I think you look at any issue and you just look at that issue and you think, well, why don't we just spend some more money and solve this problem? But all I can say, and I don't like to speak for my fellow board members, but I know that I am very reluctant to take money away from the classroom and the teachers and the programs that we have to spend it on buses if we can possibly avoid doing that. And you look at all the issues, buses don't jump out as the thing you want to funnel money for, really. So, I mean, you can make that recommendation, but I'll tell you, I look at that 55-minute gap and I see that it's almost $200,000 cheaper every year than the 50-minute
Can you go
gap.
back
I
to
start
the
thinking
money
about a
one?
55-minute gap. That's how
Oops.
sort of the dollar signs work for me. at
There we
least.
go. Yeah.
So I guess one of the things I keep telling people is it'd be real nice. No matter what we choose, it's going to have problems. And it's going to be a matter of choosing maybe the least bad set of problems. And so the more you can identify specifically what the problems with starting elementary school at 7:45 are versus getting out of high school at 4 o'clock are, at least we'll be aware of what they are. No matter what we choose, at least if we know what's coming, maybe we can do a little bit to take the edge off of that by planning for it. But it's great just to know what you prefer as far as the schedule, but also as I'm going around, I'm trying to hear what is the actual problem this will cause. Thank you.
Couple other things I want to mention. The average length of bus ride for an elementary student is between 15 and 30 minutes, and all elementary buses arrive, except for after school. Before school, they arrive 15 minutes before school, and that's to allow time for breakfast. So if you think about a start time for an elementary student, think about, okay, the bus is gonna arrive 15 minutes before start time, and then that average bus ride is gonna be 15 to 30 minutes. There are only about 25 to 30 students in the entire district that have a bus ride that's an hour long. It's very few students. There are some, but it's not a lot. The other thing I want to mention is that all of these options have built into it the buses arriving at the schools between 10 and 20 minutes early, so before and after school. So we've asked Durham, please do not give us a situation or numbers where we're going to have the same problem we have this year. We want to anticipate that ahead. Just give us the honest numbers. So we'll take a few questions, but I don't want to cut short our small group time. So go ahead.
What % of students ride buses at each level? Thank you. Like elementary, junior high, high school? Thank you.
Actually, the high school students did a survey, and it was not a random sample, but over half of the students were driven, drive themselves, and then there was like another 25% that were driven. Mm-hmm. So there weren't a lot. Then there were, in that last 25%, there were kids that were bused and walked, or I want to say maybe like 30%. Maybe do you know?
Well, if you think about at junior high, we have a 2-mile walking radius,
Okay.
and at high school, you have a 3-mile walking radius. So think about at elementary, we have basically 22-mile walking radiuses all over the place. So by far more secondary as a
Sure,
percentage.
but I'm just wondering like what percentage at each school level are outside the walking radius?
We have 3,500 kids that are bused. So, and I think we have, 13,000 kids in our district?
But 3,500, and what % of that at the high school level needs a bus?
Well, we have to plan our routes so that every child
Sure.
arrives on time.
I get it, but it would just be nice to know what the percentage is that require a bus at the secondary level.
We can take that
Okay.
away, but again, the vast majority, now again, do they use the bus is a different question.
Exactly.
Right.
Right.
The vast majority of kids are
So
eligible for a bus.
it's hard on one hand to consider and to bump you're just exchanging one complaint, one group of parents for another.
Yep.
And I'm a parent that has a kid in elementary and a kid in high school, and I can tell you, if we move the start and the end time for secondary to be the same as the elementary, we're gonna have issues. But it would just be nice to know what percentage of these
We
kids
can
need a
capture that.
bus. Because
We
I
got
can
that.
tell you, all my kids' friends drive. And she's a
I know,
freshman.
I know a lot too. Dan?
So,
To understand the problem, let's take a step back. Pre this year, there weren't many issues. What were the start times, not this year, but last year? What prevents us from going back to those start times?
The length of the school day.
Correct. And what ways can we address the length of the school days contractually? When can that be addressed?
good question.
Well, not this year.
Correct, but if Liberty opens in 2 years,
Mhm.
you've got a cluster. You're gonna have an experimental cluster.
Could be done in the
You're
future.
throwing in
Yep.
the elementary, the second elementary boundaries, which adds another layer of cluster. At this point, instead of rushing into another
Yes.
grand idea, it might make more sense to step back, examine the whole situation, and plan on going in 2017.
So talk that amongst your table. If that's
That's
your
fine.
feedback, then great.
If there's questions, I'll take questions, but comments, I want you to share with your table.
Questions are on the information shared. Go ahead.
Was there any information that you said you talked to the teachers about some of the numbers? Did any of the teachers or principals for elementary schools give any feedback to the board about what their preference was on their start time?
We've received a lot of emails.
And that was what?
Uh,
Overwhelmingly what?
Well, overwhelming, the elementary starts first.
And at what time?
A lot of times that we weren't given times, I'd say. Some people did, some people didn't. Which is interesting. I'll tell you, a lot of the feedback we get is not a full recommendation on, here's how I would start and end elementary, and here's how I would start and end high school. A lot of times you get partial information, right? Like, yeah, I think elementary should start first. And a lot of times also, okay, but this is what we're gonna do tonight. But what time would you start secondary like that? And give us a full solution. So that's one of the activities tonight, is to develop an actual recommendation. It's one thing to receive feedback, it's another thing to receive a recommendation.
Understand that.
Yeah. But yes,
Two more
did that
questions, and
answer your
that's it.
question? I mean, I think it was elementary
Or
first.
I was just wondering, can you just read through the grid, because I can't read all those numbers, and just say what the time gap is and what it would do to the cost?
Okay, 30-minute gap
Yeah.
costs $750,000 more,
More, okay.
okay? 40-minute gap, $685,000 more. I'm rounding. 50-40 split, $165,000 more. 50-minute gap, $78,000 more. 55-minute gap, we save $116.
We save 116 from what we're paying now.
Right. And remember, think of it as relative, not as exact
No,
numbers.
I know.
But it would be a savings. Okay. I'm just going to take one more question because we've already heard from you. But
Well,
go ahead.
no, my question is, the junior high, does it have to start at the same time as the high school?
Yes. In these options, they start at the same time. Right now, they start at the same time. In this option, they start at a different time.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll leave it.
And so, hold on. If we can go, I want to make sure we have a full half hour for our small group time, and then we're going to report out. I'll let you ask one more question.
So prior to the extension at the elementary level, did we double bus?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Lori,
So
if,
school at
people
that
do have
time went
questions
from
during
8:30
the-
to 3.
they can raise their
Yes,
hands if
we're
you
going to
want
be
to ask them.
walking around listening, so please, if you have a question during your discussion, raise your hand. Be happy to come by and try and answer it if I can. So, you want to explain
All
your
right.
segment?
We'll go to that slide. I'm glad everybody's fired up and ready to go. So, the first question, we want you to answer a couple questions as a group. So the first question is, do you agree that elementary...
Quiet down so I can hear him better, please.
First question for the small group activity is, do you agree that elementary should go first and secondary second? So that's a question we'd like to hear back from you on. And then if you're working with the 50, you can come back and say 55-minute. But if you're working with a 50 or 55-minute gap, what would you recommend the start times be for elementary and secondary? And then after that, we're going to talk about any key takeaways you want us to take back on Tuesday. We should focus on whatever. So, but if you could focus on those two questions, Lori will give you about a 10-minute warning. We'll just kind of gauge the group. As groups are coming together, we'll give you about a 10-minute warning to start wrapping up. But that's what we'd like to do, and we'll list your point of view on these questions at the end. We want to get done a little, by 7, a little after 7, so that we can talk about the takeaway you want us to take back to the board table on Tuesday. Does that make sense? All right, good to go. All right, thanks. And if you got questions, just raise them. We'll come around and answer them for your table. Sounds like we're going to be busy. All right, go.
To walk 2 miles to school than they'd be walking in the dark. So anything earlier than 8 would give the dark walking kid. Again, this is just hypothetical. I don't know if that would happen. So that's really why we didn't think anything earlier than 8 was a very good idea. And that was based on walking 2 miles taking 45 minutes.
Okay.
And then you had something else? Oh, and just the elementary school kids getting tired and hungry in the long afternoon.
Okay, great. Thanks, table 1. All right, mighty table number 2. Oh, right here.
Okay, so we, for the most part, agreed that elementary should start before secondary, but one individual said, but with conditions depending on what those times were. So yes, for the most part. And then we also recommended an 8 o'clock start time and an 8:50 or 55 start time for secondary school students. And I think we mostly just felt at the table that 7:45 and 7:30 was just a bit too early for students and for parents trying to get everybody to school, basically. So.
Great, thanks, table 2.
We failed. We agreed that elementary should go first. There was some disagreement on that, and I would agree that I wouldn't say it's safe, but it does kind of a bit off the time it was. As far as the ideal time, we're still figuring that out.
Split?
Yeah, I'd say it's split.
Do you have some
What is the
choices you
range?
narrowed it down to?
We had a lot of them, yeah, there's lots of discussion. One thing which we figured out though was to fix the current bus problem was $30 a kid. That $400,000 is $30 per student cost.
Spread over the entire
For the whole,
district,
but over the entire
not per
district.
student. For the whole district. In current busing.
So,
All right, thanks, table 3.
Table 4, our group is also okay with elementary starting first. Our recommended start time was 8 for elementary and 8:50 for a secondary. Reason we did that is if it is a 40-minute delay of when our high schoolers are currently starting, which is one of the goals of this all. And then also that's one of the cheapest options with that 50-minute. So we did kind of note though that high schoolers getting out at 4 is going to delay extracurriculars, but that was the biggest downfall.
All right, thanks. Table 5.
Okay, we all agreed that elementary should go first. We decided that a 55-minute gap was a $200,000 savings, and since that should be about 2.5 teachers, we thought 55 minutes was non-negotiable, because if we put that into staffing, I'm adding my own piece about staffing.
Generally.
But the $200,000 was a lot of money. Now, we were split on time. We had 4 who said no earlier than 8, and they liked an 8 for the elementary and 8:55 for the high school. And there were some of us who thought that moving it 10 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes earlier would have been okay. But the majority of the table said no.
No, we did not say 10. We said 7:55.
No, 2 of us said 10.
Sounds like it was a hard negotiation.
Yeah, so we had 4 who were adamant no earlier than 8.
The other half is fine.
Majority said no earlier than 8.
All right, thanks, 5. You guys are good. 6.
Hi. Okay, so I'm not sure we did much better than table 3 overall, but we were kind of split as to whether we wanted elementary school to start early or not. But it was like high school students tended to be like, we don't care which starts earlier so long as we don't start too late. I mean, generally we kind of agreed that if elementary school is going to start first, it shouldn't start after 8, and the high school students were like, we'd like it even before 7:45, but the elementary school parents were not exactly for that.
All right, thank you, 6. 7.
All right, so our table also agrees that elementary should start earlier. And preferred start times would be between 8 and 8:10. And if we could possibly reduce the gap time to as little as possible, that would be ideal. 30 minutes would be best, but if that's permitted, allowed, that's what we voted for.
All right, thanks. Number 8.
We reached no consensus, so.
You got nothing?
Right.
Got nothing?
We were split on whether elementary should start early. 4 of us said yes, 3 of us said no. We're also kind of all over the board on start times. There were 4 people voted for an elementary start time of 8. I voted for an elementary start time of 7:45, but I'd be fine with 8. Then there were 2 secondaries starting earlier at 7:45, all with a 50-minute gap. We had some questions. It's easy to get wrapped up in what is best for my situation. We wanted to determine who this really affects. We think it's elementary students who are affected most by any schedule change, but we don't know the answer to that question. What are the estimated costs when the new school opens with additional bus routes and that sort of thing? Are there other busing vendors that we could investigate? And a question about if elementary school were to start at 7:45, what happens to pre-algebra students?
Pre-what?
Pre-algebra.
What happens to pre-algebra students?
The sixth graders take it pre-algebra.
Got it.
I'm going to answer the what happens when you bus
So if we have time, we'll come back to those questions. Is that okay? Yeah. All right, table 9.
Okay, so I've been here for 10 minutes and I got to volunteer to this. I'll give you my opinion. No. Talked about 55-minute gap would be preferred, obviously because of the cost saving, but with considerations for the preschool. And I'll still table 8's idea with the pre-algebra students as well. And I think we came to a fairly common consensus of 7:45 for elementary and 8:40 for secondary. The concern obviously is the later the secondary goes, the later they get out, it affects a lot of things, extracurricular activities, jobs, things like that.
Great, next time. Did you agree that elementary should start first? Yes, I guess. Yes. All right, 10.
The answers were good.
We all agreed that elementary should go before high school, for secondary. We have a parent here that has kids at every level, so we kind of came to the middle ground and said 7:45 for elementary, 8:35 for high school. Can add 5, so we weren't going to argue over 5 minutes or so. No point in that.
She said 7:45 to what?
7:45 start for elementary, 8:35 for secondary.
Great, thank you. So, haven't talked to your table. So one, we'll take this information back, right? I'm going to summarize it. It'll be a nice little table. We'll take it back. What are the key themes based on your conversation that we should take back to the board and talk more about on Tuesday night?
About the bell schedule.
About the bell schedule. So for example, as we're thinking about this Tuesday, what do you want us to keep at the top? Just
safety.
Good. Safety?
Yeah, and then, but also, we know that it's not on the table tonight. We know that nothing can be done for next year. But I think a lot
a lot of us, we're in consensus that we want next year to readdress the length of the day. I think there should be more days and shorter days. And if they have to do that for secondary too, then do that for secondary too. But I think that the longer summer, I think it's going against all the educational research. I mean, the drain over the summer, it's like we're having a longer summer now. They're getting tired.
Got it.
So.
What else? Again, for Tuesday night, what else you, just.
Why are we allowing Durham to dictate what these times are? I mean, we're paying them. Why can't we push back and say, this is not appropriate?
Okay.
Or find another vendor.
What else?
I think we need to take into consideration extracurricular activities, and especially for high school students, the length they can extend after school, and the fact that we have a lot more homework than elementary schools students, and so you have to keep in consideration time after school for that.
Right. What else?
I think one thing that came up for us was impact on families with elementary school kids after school. Like if we end at 2:45, it actually creates a lot more cost and burden for families too, to create safe environments for kids and pay for kids after school for care.
So you said if you start when?
Like if we were ending at 2:45, it just, like
Longer
with
time.
3:45, what we
Okay.
noticed is that some parents will let their kids kind of be the latchkey kid just for a very short time. With an extra hour added, it is going to be a financial burden for a lot of families
I would
to.
disagree with that as a parent of elementary school kids who pay for both before school and after school. I can see a reduction in cost for staffing for after school programs if it were one time a day instead of having to gather staff together in the morning and in the afternoon. That I would think that cost would go down for parents who are paying for both before and after just as a rebuttal.
All right, let's just keep going. We want to get the ideas out, and then we're going to see if we can come to like consensus on the top few.
I would like you guys to keep in mind whether or not the hours that the elementary school students are staying later in the afternoon are effective for their education. We added the extra half an hour to be productive and to help them with reading, and if we're keeping them an hour and a half beyond the time that their teachers say they're effectively learning anything, then is it doing more damage than good?
I guess my concern was based on, we still don't know. I got an email, with my kids offered a place at a before and after school program, but that is all dependent on knowing what time school starts next year, and I have 5 days to say yes or no.
Right. Okay, what else?
Going along with the athletics and later start time for the high school, a lot of times teens are leaving during the school day, or
Right.
the school day, you push that back, and they're missing more educational time.
It's the academics, they lose like about 2 hours, 6th and 7th hour.
Yeah.
Right. What else?
I'm concerned about elementary kids being out in the mornings, getting to school, especially in the winter, so much before 8 start time, making those about safety.
Okay, what else?
I think if the difference between the 50 minutes versus 55 minutes does save us a significant amount of money, we should try to push to see if we can make that work. Because it could be a big, I don't know if it's new teachers or what it is, but to me, that amount is significant and it could benefit the kids. So
Usually
if we're forming our ideas now, let's try to maybe have that in mind, that would be our goal, to be the one that is almost a money saver. So.
Okay, right. Usually divide the number by like 75, 80,000 and get the number of teachers. That's what benefits and everything.
Is it possible to get a parent's input, like a survey done to all parents, all the schools, give them all the options and then vote what is preferred time, and then kind of take that input and put it on the school board, in front of the school board, and see what results. Is that possible to have that survey? Is that should it be a cost issue? Or?
Anything's possible. We'll talk that Tuesday night. I mean, that was kind of the intent of the committee and public input.
Only 8 parents participated in the committee, so that's not representative of anything.
And actually, a lot of the other participants that weren't categorized as parents were parents, because they were teachers. They work for the district, but they also had kids, and I just didn't put them in the parent category because they were in another category. But you're right, it's parents.
that we're needing
Yeah,
to
if we're
hear
gonna
from.
survey
Yep.
parents or adults, we also need to make sure that we're surveying the students, because a lot of the students, there's actually kind of a splash about the whole starting later for the high school students. There are a lot of students that don't.
I think City and West both did pretty big surveys, right? Yeah, and some of the student leadership was surprised at the answer.
Chris, I'm in favor of the 55-minute to achieve that, but I'd also like the board to be very transparent in what they plan to do with the cost savings with that money.
Yeah, right on. Okay, this is always the fun part. Yes.
I have one of this city or metropolitan area isn't large enough or have enough people that 1 hour bus ride should even be conscionable. So I doubt there's another vendor, but there's got to be some pressure because we have friends at Shimmick who it's inconsistent. That was the other problem. If the bus ride is always 40 minutes and you can plan for it, that's okay. But one day it's 30 minutes and one day it's an hour and 10 minutes, that's unconscionable. So that's one of the things is that find another vendor, go back to whatever, put some pressure on them so that there's some consistency in the busing because it's impossible as a parent if it's inconsistent.
Okay. This is always the fun part. So we heard about 20 or 30 different ideas. So can I try this? I'm just trying to replay what you said, right? So don't let me put words in your mouth. I heard a lot about academics. Should academic outcomes be one of our key focus areas? Just trying to, I don't want to put words in your mouth, and it sounds like stating the obvious, but that's what we should be talking about tonight, right? I mean,
I also think academics aren't divorced from like family welfare and how kids are doing, whether they're sleeping and having time for breakfast and all that stuff. You know, I don't think it exists in a vacuum by itself. So
That's right.
I think that there are like related factors.
now I think I heard safety and darkness as a theme, kind of relates to ability to eat breakfast. By the way, I can read my writing later, so don't worry. Safety, so darkness, walk to school, all that good stuff. I heard a fair number of people say, put the dollars back in the classroom. So would that be a focus thing we want to take back to? And I heard that, be clear on exactly what we're going to do with it. So what would there be a number 4?
I'd like to get back to Chris's point. We're really choosing which is the least bad option.
Right.
So the outcome should be balanced for all the members of our community. It should serve elementary students well. It should, but not at the expense of high school students. High school students should not be served at the expense of elementary students. There's going to be a compromise.
Does everybody agree with that? There's a balance in here somewhere?
5 minutes is not worth ripping apart. It's not. It's 5 minutes.
And then I think I heard busing. The language was putting pressure on the busing company, but maybe it's consistency of busing or consistency.
We should be driving that bus instead of busing.
Every parent with a CDL.
You're driving the bus.
No thanks.
I'm just going to call it expectations.
And then I think it was like put pressure to make a good offer, right?
Yep, on time, good value. Yep.
Forgive me, I can't read your writing. Do you have extracurriculars up there? And by that,
Well, that'd be the balance probably, yeah.
Okay.
I'll add that though. So there was elementary. I don't have spell checker up here either, so give me
To tie in with number 1 is one of the educators in the room, I just talk about too that the determination also allows for that professional learning time to exist for our teachers, so we can have that impact on the academics within the current. It has really compacted that in the elementary level. So that if it could be, that could be a topic of consideration as to what that teacher day would look like, and then allow for those opportunities for our staff to continue to grow and develop. I think that's critically important.
Yeah, it's got to work for students, got to work for staff too. Is that a pretty good summary?
So I have another thing, impacts on other things like food service and your school cleaning staff and
Before and after school programs, right? I mean, there's a lot of things.
well, like just support staff,
Yeah.
how will this affect food service? Will it, we do all this and then we spend the $100,000 on dining? That's what.
That's a question. I hear it, but.
Does it affect the cost of other changes? Yeah, are we saving here just to spend somewhere else?
Exactly. I mean, I think.
I don't think you know the answer to that, but it's something to think about because.
Plus,
I
we're not,
have heard so
we're not
many
even
food
saving if we go at 50 minutes.
What?
We're not even saving any money if we go with the 50-minute option, so,
I
yeah.
know, but even in our, are we
Are there hidden
creating
costs?
an extra cost? We thought we were picking the best scenario, but for another reason, we find out later, we've just spent another $100,000 on. I had heard talk of food service could be an issue depending on where you put the meal times on. Do you need more drivers and whatever? Do you have to get the food ready faster?
Right, and get it out.
Because you,
For lunch.
yeah, so, I don't know the answer to that at all, but.
Yeah,
it's
it's not that
something-
we're aware of, but I mean, some of those conversations have happened. All right, we're gonna, one
I just
last.
want to make sure I see this as a given, that it is absolutely not okay for anybody to have to wait for a bus after school. Unsupervised. Either way, really.
No, they should not have, they shouldn't have.
I assume that it's a given that next year that no kids will be having to wait after school.
That is supposedly built into all of these options that we have put up there, that there will only be the, we want a little bit of window between the bell rings and the bus leaves.
right,
But only the goal is to make the buses arrive at those times and no later.
So that's a given, so we don't need to write that all down.
Okay, feedback, 2 minutes left, 2 minutes left, feedback. Oh, one last one.
I'm kind of this consensus between the three high school groups here, that we wouldn't be opposed to staying after school a little bit, waiting for buses.
Just for the high school.
That'd be kind of almost a little bit of a study hall to try and get some homework done.
Talk to teachers and
Yeah,
stuff.
talk to teachers, have a chance to make up tests, stuff like that.
No, thank you for adding that, yeah. Right, you guys are more autonomous than our elementary schools for sure.
If we seem to be heading toward having secondary start second, it would seem to make sense to have our administrators really start to think about ideas that would take the edge off of some of the after-school issues, if there are some extracurricular issues. If we knew that there were things we could do, that would potentially influence.
Well, yeah, use of the zero period and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Critique on this process, did it work for you? I think this was an awesome group, by the way. You guys are really good. But critique, did it work? We got through a lot of stuff in like an hour and 25 minutes. It's all good. We're going to stick around. If you got extra questions, like I know there's some questions back there, happy to answer them, but we said we'd be done by 7:30. So, you good? So thank you. Have a good night.